Okay, this is pretty much all you got to do. Just stick them in there, pack the sand around there firm so it get rid of the airspace in there, and you can do a lot of different cuttings this way. A lot of different plants will root. You're not going to get 100% success rate, but even in a high production wholesale nursery where they do thousands and thousands of plants, they don't get 100%. They'll get a lot better than you and I will get like this, because they have very sophisticated equipment to do, and they do every plant a little bit different. I mean, after years and years of research. In the next segment of this video, I'm going to show you how to make hardwood cuttings of deciduous plants. We're going to do some forsythia, some burning bush, some purple sand cherry, and some grape plants. Now, in this portion of the video, I'm going to show you how to make these cuttings by making the hardwood cutting, then turning it upside down and burying it in the ground over the winter, and then digging it up again in the spring. But you should also know that you can stick these right in a bed of sand, just like we did with the evergreen cuttings. I've had successes and failures doing them both ways. So if you're going to do some cuttings of deciduous plants, then I encourage you to do a few both ways. You can make the cutting just like you're going to see in the video, but then stick it directly in the bed of sand, just like we did with the evergreen cuttings. Now let's talk about some cuttings, rooting plants from deciduous plants. A deciduous plant is something that loses leaves from a hardwood cutting. Now, Dustin, come on in here a little closer. Let's take a look at what we need. Now, these are burning bush. If you can see, of course, there's no leaves on there, and burning bush has a very delicately, like a winged bark on there. When you're making a hardwood cutting, what you want to do is cut just these little tiny bumps that you see right here are nodes. So you want to cut the butt end of that cutting just below a node, because that's where it's going to root. There's a node there, so we're going to cut it just about like that. Now the top, we're going to leave the top alone on these, but sometimes, because these are tip cuttings. But now this is purple sand cherry. This is a leafy plant. It gets a red purplish leaf, a little tiny pink flower in the spring. And now here the nodes are further apart, but there's a node there. Again, we're going to cut it right below the node. Now here we're going to get more than one cutting. So what we'll do is we'll cut right below this node. Let me make my cut. So that leaves us this much space on top. Now this part will die back, but that'll also give us an area that'll protect the plant when we stick it in the ground for winter storage, which is something we're going to do in a minute here. So out of these, you see, this is no good because the node is here and the butt end is down here, and that's not going to root. So we want to cut it up tighter to the node like that, and then again above the node, just about like that. Okay, let's stop the tape for a second. Okay, now this is a Concord grape plant. Now these are very easy to make from hardwood cuttings. Again, the same thing. We're just going to cut below the node. Now in this, you'll notice that the nodes are quite a distance apart, 2 or 3 inches, and some of them are actually more than that. But again, I'm going to cut it just below this node and above that one like that. Cut off these little curly cues on the side. I've got that one cut below a node, and then I'll cut about an inch above this node. Now look at how big that cutting is, but there's only 3 buds on there. But that's the way these things are, and believe it or not, these things actually will root doing this. Cutting them up here again, and you got to cut off this because that's all going to die back. So I cut it right below that node, and up here, again, but just below the bottom node, and about an inch above the top node. Let me grab another one here. Now this is all this year's growth that grew this spring. cut it up here. The ideal way to do these cuttings is to make them and then get them stuck in all. Take your cutting, make it up, and then stick it in the ground all the same day. Now these we're not gonna actually plant these right now. We're just gonna make our cuttings, and then we're gonna dig a hole and bury the cuttings until spring. And what'll happen is over the winter they will callus up. Some of them may even start a few small roots, and then in the spring we'll dig them up and replant them in a row where we want them to actually start growing. Now what we'll do, we got them in a little, line up all the butt ends, and with the grapes you can see that there's no way to get them even, but that doesn't matter. Get them all lined up like that, and then we'll just tie them in nice little bundles to keep them tight. Okay, on the grape, put 2 strings on the grapes because they're kind of wild. And then I want to line up the butt ends to make sure that they're all pretty well lined up, and none of them are, but that's just about the way it's going to look. We'll do the same thing with these. Okay, let's stop the tape right there. Okay, I've got my cuttings all tied into 3 little bundles here, and I'm going to hand them to Kevin and let him hold them while I dig a hole. Hang on to those, Kev. Dig a hole with a post hole digger so we get it nice round hole. We don't have to dig a great big hole this way. Rocks down there. We want to get the hole deep enough that we can get the cuttings in there. And now we're going to put them in the hole upside down. That keeps them from growing, and it keeps the butt ends near the surface so the sun can warm the ground a little bit and actually start the callusing process. Let's see if that's deep enough. Hand me some cuttings there, Kevin. Well, that's not quite deep enough for that great big long grape cutting that we got there. Okay, now we'll try it. Yep, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to fill that back in. Then we'll drop the other cuttings in. You got to make sure that you got them going upside down, and when they don't have leaves on them, it's a little difficult to tell. Then all I'm going to do is fill them in. Move out of the way there, Kev. Move over that way a little bit, please. Alright, hand me the bamboo pole, Kev. And we'll stick this bamboo pole in here so we know where they're at in the spring. We're going to come and dig them up. Now these things will stay here probably until May 1st or so. That's it. That's all there is to making some hardwood cuttings from deciduous plants. We'll leave them right there, and they'll callus up over the winter. And spring we'll dig them up, dig a little trench, stick them in there, and then over the summer months they'll root and develop leaves at the same time. By fall of next year we'll have some burning bush and purple sand cherry and a few grape plants. That's it for this segment of the video. Okay, now This is a red twig dogwood. This plant is it does flower, but it's not like all your flowering dogwood trees. The flower is not very much to look at really. But the highlight of this plant is the red twigs during the winter months. As you can see now, all the leaves have fallen off, and the twigs are brilliant red. And this is a nice landscape plant. It's very attractive against the snow. But it also has a very pretty green and white variegated leaf in the summer months, which also makes it a nice landscape plant. One of the unique features of a plant like this plant can be layered. And when I say layered, that's a form of propagation where you actually pull down a branch like this, and this one has been pruned in the field, so it's not the ideal candidate, but we can still do the demonstration. Pull it down and cover it with soil and leave these tips sticking up, just like that. And that plant actually can and will root there. Now, it would actually be beneficial to scar that plant a little bit where you're covering it with soil, but that's not absolutely necessary. Again, we'll pull down a branch over here. This one will work. Dig a little pocket, push the soil in there, and cover it up just like that. Pull these up a little bit. Oops. It's a little bit rigid, so we have to put some more soil on there. Now, believe it or not, this plant will actually root where you have it layered. And one of the benefits to this method of propagation is the fact that you can actually root the plant while it's still attached to the parent plant. So this part of the plant, these tips underneath here, are actually still alive. They're going to leaf out, but at the same time, it's going to root back here where we've covered it with soil. And to show you how effective it is, I actually went out in the nursery and dug this plant just for this demonstration. Because in the field, this plant, some of these branches on the back side inadvertently got covered up during cultivation. And I'm going to prune one of these off, kind of tangle up. But as you can see, this was still attached to the plant, and this was a branch coming out, but it also rooted because it was underneath the soil. There was soil on top of it, so it rooted. So if I were going to keep this plant, I would probably prune it up a little bit like this, cut the top of it off, and take that, and that's ready to go. Just pull that root down and dig a little hole, stick it in there. That will grow and develop into a landscape plant. And as soon as we're done with this video here, that's exactly what we'll do with it. Here's another one. Again, this was just a branch that got covered with soil, and it had actually developed some roots. I was just looking to see if we could get more than one plant out of here, but it doesn't look like it off of this piece. But again, I'd cut the top heavily. Severe pruning is necessary if you're going to grow nice landscape plants. And this one, because there are so many roots, I'd actually prune the roots up a little bit. Just like that. Now, the branches that I just covered up here in this video are going to do the same thing. They're going to root and grow into plants just like this. Now, if I take this plant and stick it in the nursery here, it will branch out in the spring and leaf out and grow into a very mature plant like this in just a couple of years. This is actually a very vigorous plant. Again, we're going to layer one more branch here, dig a little hole, tuck that down in there, and push some dirt up on top of it. Pull these up out of the way and pack them so they're growing more upright. And that's really all there is to it. It's a very simple form of propagation. I have a friend in the nursery business. He's done hydrangeas this way for years and years and years. They recently went to more sophisticated systems, and they had a lot of problems. At one point, they wished they could have gone back to doing the layering, but they thought they had it figured out, and they pulled out all their layering plants, so they couldn't do it. But the layering actually worked better for them than using intermittent mist system and things that are supposed to be so good. But that hydrangea plant actually propagated easier and more successfully through a process of layering. So that's just another way to propagate landscape plants. It's real easy, but it is effective. You could probably do this with Forsythia, Weigelia, just about any woody type landscape plant. I've read where you can do it with Canadian hemlocks. I've never tried it, but it's worth a try. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't hurt the parent plant, and if it works, you have a plant. If not, you just throw it away and start over with something else. That's it. Okay, let's talk about grafting. Grafting is a form of propagation. It's used for landscape plants that are extremely difficult to propagate through other means. The plant we're going to do today is a lace-leaf weeping Japanese maple. Now, lace-leaf weeping Japanese maple does not, it's very, very, very difficult to get it to root on its own roots. And if you grow a Japanese maple from seed, you don't get the weeping variety. What you get is an upright variety, pretty much a non-desirable plant. Now that's what this is. Its botanical name is Acer palmata. It's a regular Japanese maple. This was grown from seed. And if you let this plant grow in its natural state, it's just not a very attractive plant. This one actually has green leaves, which makes it even less desirable. But to get the weeping variety, you actually have to take a cutting, which is called a scion, and attach it to this plant, and through a method of grafting. And then once the graft is healed and well established, then you cut off this plant. So what you're doing is growing the weeping variety on the roots and the stem of this upright variety. Grafting it's not something that's real easy to do. It's easy enough, but there are a lot of variables, a lot of things that really can make a difference. The ideal situation for successful grafting of a plant like this is to have the plants dormant. This is, what's the date today? March 12th, I believe. And actually, grafting now is fine, or even any time into February. But the ideal situation is to have these plants dormant and then bring them in and let them warm up. Now, I've had these at about 68, 70 degrees for probably 3 weeks. As you can see, it's just starting to leaf out, which is just about the ideal stage to graft something onto this plant. Now, the scion wood that we're going to graft onto this is completely dormant. That's still outside. It hasn't shown any signs of growth for the spring, is what you want. You don't want the scion wood to be actively growing. You want this plant to establish some root activity. You can see there's some little tiny white roots, which are new roots, and that means that the plant is actively growing, and then right after that happens, you start to see some leaf development. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a demonstration of grafting, but first I want to show you a picture of the plant that we want to end up with, the landscape plant that we're trying to grow. Let's take a look at that snapshot. Now this is the lace leaf weeping Japanese maple. As you can see, it's got a very weeping habit, and those leaves are very, very delicately cut. It's a very, very nice landscape plant. In a garden center, you're going to have to pay, even for a very small plant, so something that would probably be one-fifth of the size of the one you're looking at this picture. It will cost you probably $150 to $175. That's why they are extremely difficult to grow. It takes a long time to produce one. So if you can grow one yourself through the method of grafting, you can save yourself a lot of money. And grafting is fun. But this is the plant. It's a lace leaf weeping Japanese maple. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a cutting off of this plant and attach it to the upright variety through a method of grafting. Now what you're looking at here, this is a plant that was recently grafted. This piece here is the scion wood. As you can see, the bark was cut, and then this scion wood was tapered on both sides and inserted in there, and then it's wrapped with a rubber band, and there's some grafting wax put around there to maintain a very moist condition inside. Then once that scion wood is actually, the graft is successful and the scion is growing, then the rootstock is cut off. You can see where it was cut off right here. Now that joint is not very attractive, but that's down very close to the ground in this situation. In the plants that we're going to be doing, I'm grafting up higher, and the graft is not going to be very attractive on these either, but once the plant develops and the head starts to weep down, and the weeping habit will actually cover the graft union. So it won't show once the plant is further developed. But again, you can see this is the desired plant. This is the lace leaf weeping Japanese maple, and the bark is peeled back on this, and that is inserted in, and then the bark is pushed back in. You actually force it in there, and then once it's established, this is cut off right here. Now what we're looking at here is a very crude drawing. My artwork isn't very handy, but if you remember, if you've ever seen a piece of cut wood, like a piece of firewood, the growth rings in a tree that to establish the number of years of the tree, or each year you can see where the tree grew. But basically, that's what these rings represent here. Now, what we're doing when we're grafting, this outside ring is the bark of the tree, and then this inside ring distinguishes the cambium layer. The cambium layer is the layer of material between the bark and the actual wood of the tree. All this is the wood inside here. But this very thin layer on the outside is the cambium layer. That is the support system of the tree. That's where all the nutrients and everything pass through the tree to feed the tree and so on. So when we do this grafting process, what we're going to do is we're going to match the cambium layer of the rootstock with the cambium layer of the scion wood that we're putting in there. So it's extremely important that when you make your graft that you do not cut deep. You don't want to be into the wood, because the wood will not graft to itself. The wood actually is almost dead. You want to get into the cambium layer on the rootstock, and then you want to be in the cambium layer on the desired variety, the scion wood that you're grafting onto it. So that's extremely important. Okay, here we are with the plant again. This is the plant that we're going to graft to. I already went out and collected my scion wood. This is the scion that we are going to graft to this plant. We're actually going to attach this to this plant. This is a lace leaf weeping Japanese maple. Now this one has a green leaf. I did some red ones yesterday, and I'll do some of the red varieties again later on today. But the scion wood that I have right now is a green leaf. It's called Waterfall. It's a very pretty landscape plant. Now basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this plant up. First of all, I'm going to cut off any branches on the lower half of this plant, because these are the upright variety, and that's something that we're not going to want, because this much of the plant is going to be, this part is all going to be part of the finished product, and we are going to attach this piece right here on the plant. And then we'll leave this part growing, because when these leaves develop, they will actually feed the plant and keep it healthy, and that will help the graft union to heal. Then once the graft is successfully established, then we'll cut this off right here, and then the grafted variety will grow from there. Okay, let's take a quick look. Let's take a close look at actually doing the graft. Okay, here we go. This is a scion wood. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a cut. Now remember what we talked about earlier with the cambium layer. Now on something that's this small in diameter, this is it's important, but it's also difficult. So what I'm going to do, when you're grafting, you have to have a very, very sharp knife. And I should have my thumb wrap so I don't cut it, but I forgot to do that before we started taping. So see, I'm going to cut very, very light, because I don't want to cut down into the wood. And then near the end, I'll cut a little bit deeper. And then I'll turn it over and do the other side just about the same way, very, very light. And then at the end, I'll make a very sharp cut down. That way that tapers. This will be the outside. It's tapering out. That'll be, so as I wrap that layer of bark up over that, there's a little bit of taper to help that. You may not be able to see it, but there's the wood right here. The rest of this is cambium. So I did pretty well on the outside. And the inside looks real good. I just barely nicked the wood, so I've got a lot of cambium there to make my graft. And now what I'm going to do, I'll go up here on the tree and make a cut up here. Make sure we got a good video shot of this. And now all I'm going to do is just make a very light cut here again, extremely thin. That cut's probably about 7/8 of an inch long. Peel it back with a knife a little bit to make sure that, and it looks like I've got nothing but cambium. I didn't cut into the wood, so that should be a good graft union. Then I just take my scion, with the tapered side will be outside, and the flatter side goes in towards the plant, and I'm going to insert that into the cut I made. See, so what we're doing is we're putting all the cambium layers. We've actually got 4 different layers of cambium, and we're matching those up the best we can. That's actually a pretty good graft, because that's going to be pretty tight. And then what we do, get a little bit more in the center, and then we wrap that with real tight with a rubber band. This is a grafting band, it's a regular rubber band will work, but these are designed so that they actually will supposedly biodegrade and fall off in a couple of months, but you can't depend on that. So if you leave it on too long, it will actually begin to girdle the plant. So after the graft is well established, it's a good idea to go out there and make sure to get the rubber bands off. So all I'll do is I'll start my wrap up here. And then pull it nice and tight and work my way down as I wrap it. You want to completely cover the graft, if at all possible, with the rubber band, because you want that graft union to be as airtight as possible, so it doesn't dry out. You need good moist conditions in there in order for that to callus up and heal properly. That's about the end of the wrap. Let's see if I got enough to... Yeah, I'm actually able to get a little bit of a slip knot here. And that's about it. The graft is just about, the actual graft is complete. Now we got a little slip knot on the rubber band. We can pull that to get the, after the graft union is completely healed. Now all we're going to do is take a little bit of melted grafting wax and cover that to make it that much more airtight in there, so that the graft itself doesn't dry out. See, that's pretty good. That's just about the extent of the graft itself. Then once the graft is healed up and it's ready to, it's growing, and this part actually starts growing. See, this part of the plant is going to be much further ahead than the scion would, because we brought this in and warmed it up for about 3 weeks. So when that's all done, then all we'll do is we'll go back and we'll cut this off right here and leave the scion wood, and we'll be all set. That's a complete graft.